In this video, I played a brand new game called Get to Work. I'll be telling you about the early speedrun progression, my challenge for the world record, and even some crazy decisions that were made for the content. So let's start out with my first completion. Get to Work is a fighting style game which happens to be right up my alley, since I used to make fighting content all the time. It also happens to be the reason why the developer Isto and his team reached out to me about playtesting this game 9 months ago. Isto is a friend of mine who I actually met at TwitchCon in 2022, through my friends and now roommates who come from the Atrioc community. What I played was an early build, with minimal aspects of it making it into the final game we see today, but it was definitely enough for me to appreciate and enjoy the simple yet smooth movement mechanics and get excited. But then, I forgot about it. Until Atrioc announced the game would be releasing in December, and all the hype started to set back in. And if you don't know who Atrioc is a big streamer who actually helped to release the game in conjunction with Isto Incorporated. While Isto's team designed the gameplay and map design, Atrioc was in charge of this game's story and humor. In the story, a bald man in a suit with roller skates on all fours climbs the corporate ladder to go from an average unemployed man to CEO. Voiced by CDawgVA, the game is an incredibly satirical take on the corporate climb in American capitalism, and it has this Stanley Parable feel to it, where our character's progression is being told and also mocked by an outside British narrator. Just take a listen in.
What does a middle manager even do?
Who fucking knows?
Nobody knows.
Yeah, so there you go.
More than you, and that's a good enough reason.
The game even includes these collectibles that are podcast anecdotes from a character called Chaz. It's called the Grindset Podcast, and Chaz is sort of this Andrew Tate type scammy figure voiced by Atrioc, who is all about rollerblading, risky business ventures, and ignoring the norms of society in an effort to become rich. Just listen to how ridiculous this is.
I've been personally microdosing deadly nightshade for the past 3.5 weeks. And my doctor told me it's dangerous. He told me to stop.
That's ridiculous.
These clips also have special guest voice lines from people like Ludwig, Stans, and Spectacor, so it's always a treat to listen in. But jumping into the actual gameplay, we're treated to an extremely flowy momentum-based movement game that combines Monkey Ball or Trackmania with fighting map design. Rollerblading on all fours comes with a lot of speed and a lot of chaining together jumps to hit ramps smoothly and retain that speed. And that's the name of the game in Get to Work. Smooth jump transitions that retain your speed are going to be the key to clearing gaps and hitting jumps. This sometimes requires you to slow down or use air strafing in midair to hit that jump just right. So you have a lot of control over your character. But if there's anything we learned from Monkey Ball, once you get up to high speeds, keeping control over your character can sometimes be near impossible, especially on tight platforms with big falls ahead. How are we not going to slip off? Luckily, this game includes a grab mechanic. Grabbing allows your character to grip the floor, slowing himself down to a halt, and giving you time to stop and think about the next jumps ahead. And there's even a recovery mechanic involving grabbing. If you do slip off an edge while grabbing, your character will slide down the wall before hanging from his hands. Once hanging, you can actually swing yourself back and forth to fling your momentum upwards and let go of the wall, climbing back onto the ledge you just fell from. So not every little slip up will result in a massive loss of progress. Sometimes you're going to be able to save yourself. So you have your directional input, your camera movement, and your grab button. And that is pretty much all the controls we're going to need to know. So I started my stream and hopped in a call with my roommate Noah, or Negneg. He had already been playing the game for 3 hours while I was at work, and now it was time for me to get started. In terms of all the fighting games I've played before, this one was one of the easier ones. The movement was super nice and easy to control. The map design was beginner friendly by design and honestly was done very well. You see, while the normal path sticks out to the player, the recovery jumps are designed to blend in with the tones of the walls. Every fall will lead you to some kind of ramp or platform where you can recover back to the regular path. I think the best example of this is in cogs section. The normal path is made of wood, and you need to grab these spinning cogs to fling up the map. If you fall, you land on these green sections that are the same color as the rest of the area. But each green recovery area funnels you to some kind of ramp where you can jump back onto one of the cogs that is in the regular pathway. These kinds of recovery jumps are all over the map, and are brilliantly hidden throughout. But as we'll go higher, there will be more pits to fall into and less of these recovery pathways. The game starts out in sections, with soft checkpoints that will basically not allow you to fall further. After leaving our bedroom, the first section spirals you up these wooden ramps, allowing you to get used to the feel of the game. Then, up close to the ceiling of this room, we jump into our first interview. Jumping across these moving platforms, each layer represents a part of the interview process, where we're literally and figuratively jumping through hoops to get our first job. Finally, after 3 layers of moving platforms, we come to this room with a floating offer letter that we reach out to collect.
Oh, fuck. We regret... Oh, he's singing. He's reading it.
To inform you
Say it together now, that the role has been filled. Fuck. Well, we're back in our room.
Yeah, so we're not getting a job that easy. And after landing back in our bedroom, Luckily, through a family friend, we have the opportunity to get a warehouse job. We have a short training section where the game gives us these tiny ramps that we have to use to get big height in order to progress to the next platforms. This subtly teaches the player about the momentum in this game and the importance of chaining jumps before leading us into the warehouse section. This section is much larger in height, with lots of big jumps and this new mechanic, the launchers. By grabbing onto these platforms, they shoot forward, pulling you along with it, launching you onto the next path. On our first day at Amazon, Sea-Dog sarcastically hints to us that working in a place with no safety structures is a wonderful place to be.
Give my fucking pay raise. Pay raise!
Ah, so rumor has it that corporate spent all of their money on fighting
What the
Ted's
fuck is
injury
this?
lawsuit. So they've thrown you a pizza party instead, which, according to your boss, is arguably better.
So no pay raise because of an injury lawsuit due to the lack of safety protocol. But hey, maybe we can become the warehouse manager. Promotion! Oh, college degree required. Okay. But unfortunately, that was not meant to be, as we're denied the promotion due to lacking a college degree. So instead, we leave this job to become an unpaid intern instead and gain experience. After traversing the top of the warehouse section, we come to the unpaid intern section. We do another annoying tiny ramp training segment before reaching this next section that deals with all the beauty of being a coffee runner and doing nothing but kissing ass. This section goes around in circles, gaining you height on each floor where Sea-Dog tells us that some interns get chosen to be interviewed to be junior financial analysts. And so, we get our interview, which just involves going around these skinny curves. But luckily, we get the job and progress to COG section as a junior financial analyst. Now, finally with a real job, the level design starts to get a little more interesting. COG section has us grabbing these spinning wheels and letting go to propel ourselves upwards with lots of speed. The metaphor is that this lowly junior financial analyst job makes you just another small cog in the greater machine of the company. But after schmoozing at the company wine mixer and befriending a higher up by bonding over being bald, we come to the next section where we get an interview to become middle management. This section has a ton of these bouncy barrels in them, which represent other applicants for middle management. It's a precarious section that snakes back and forth and also is our first section where falling could lead us back down to the previous COG section. But we progressed onwards into middle management where it was again another soft checkpoint, impossible to lose progress. Middle management is a very windy section that starts out at the bottom of skyscrapers before ultimately scaling you up the side of a slanted building. At the top, our character is trying to secure enough votes from the board to become a department head. After falling a bit short by one vote, the story says that we get in contact with the real Sea-Dog VA and pay him an absurd amount of money to come to one of the executive's kids' birthday parties, which successfully bribes our way into the department head position. And that is our last soft checkpoint. From department head until the end of the game at CEO, the game becomes a snaking vertical climb that at its very worst will drop us back down to this floor right here. And as a Fadian expert, this is where the real game began. It had taken me just over 1 hour to get here, but now the level design was starting to get tougher. You see, with this game being all about speed and momentum, sometimes there were extremely large jumps to hit. This made the scale of this game massive. And looking up, even though there were only 3 sections left until the final jump, it was looking tall as hell. So it was time to get to work. These top sections had a lot of jumps that were very spread out, meaning that you needed to be sending it full speed above the large gaps ahead. There are also these bounce pads that are now mixed in with the full flow of jumps, that are just instant height increases when you land on them. So I climbed to the top of department head and then I was faced with this jump to become the vice president. This jump snakes you back and forth on these curves before jumping you over a gap between the skyscrapers to a different building altogether. But I made the jump and was now into the vice president section. This section was more of the same. Large full speed jumps that eventually take you upwards to another curved snake jump back across to the original first building. But I made it, and now I was back in the pink building, where falling would take me back 2 whole sections. This sequence had bounce pad jumps, and even these laser sections where jumping through the laser triggered the platforms on the wall to retract, giving you limited time to get across these jumps. This tripped me up, but once I knew what the lasers did, on the second try, I was able to surpass it. Now doing these last 3 sections wasn't exactly first try. There was a lot of trial and error in trying to climb up to the top, but eventually, I reached the top of the skyscraper where one last final snake jump was the only thing between me and CEO. And I totally missed it. But on the second try, I hit the jump, and in just under 3 hours, I had already beaten the game. Now, there is also a secret ending past the CEO too. Through this doorway, the story continues where we take the Bezos and Elon Musk route, greedily pushing our companies forward, becoming billionaires until we start a spaceship company and are so rich we decide to live on the moon. But for now, there was no time for that. With the launch of this game, Isto had also announced a special speedrunning competition. The goal was to set speedrunners cash prizes for the best times after 1 day, 3 days, and 10 days, simultaneously giving the best players a reason to keep grinding and push the limit of the game, so Isto can make a YouTube video about it. And also, it served as a rapid bug test for the game, giving Isto and his team a lot of players who will limit test the physics and encourage bugs to be found. That way, they could find and patch things out and tighten up their finished product. So knowing I was already going to be one of the best launch day players, I decided to go for the 24-hour prize of 500 Canadian dollars. With nothing but my first playthrough's knowledge, I played for the next 3 hours straight, grinding out runs and memorizing the route, until I ended day 1 with a 31:51. Which I uploaded to YouTube, submitted to the contest, and went to sleep. Unluckily for me, I have a job, so I needed to be awake and get to work by 9 a.m. I had already stayed up late, and the first day's contest was ending at noon the next day while I was at work. So other players, able to play for more than just 8 out of the 24 hours available, surpassed my time. When I woke up, I saw that a player named Frostkiller had already beaten my time with a 23:48. And even more insane was this other run by Sievedite, who had a 17:37. Sievedite had figured out that if you ragdoll on the bounce pads, somehow you get a crazy height increase that basically skips the entirety of the map. So even though he wasn't the fastest player, he was certainly the most crafty, earning the fastest time for day 1. However, this run was set to be invalidated, as the competition's rule set was to remain glitchless. So that left us with Frostkiller's 23:48. What did he do differently compared to my speedrun? Well, for starters, my run was extremely rudimentary. I followed the main path pretty faithfully, except for 2 skips that were found extremely early. The first was floor's 3 skip and unpaid intern. After going around the circle twice, at the end of floor 2, it is actually possible to get enough speed on this ramp to fly up to floor 4, skipping floor 3 entirely. But the other skip is more of a major one. At the top of middle management, before department head, in the section where you're trying to get a hold of YouTuber Sea-Dog, the game takes you on a detour before jumping you to this golden platform to progress. But early on, my chat and I came to the realization that with enough speed, you can actually skip all this by smacking into the wall under the golden platform and popping yourself upwards, allowing you to grab and hang from the edge of the golden platform. Then, with a good enough flick, you can swing yourself up the ledge, entirely skipping the detour section. This was a great time save that would go on to be used in every single speedrun afterwards. However, when compared to me, Frostkiller's run was simply better in every way. Along with cleaner movement, he introduced a ton of new skips. The first being Warehouse Manager skip. Normally, Warehouse Manager is a small room where you need to trigger the college degree required denial wall to open up this side hallway and progress to unpaid intern. But Frostkiller figured out that by cutting this corner on the ramp leading into Warehouse Manager, you could entirely skip the sequence and move on right away. Then at the end of Warehouse, he used this corner cut to jump straight into the hallway to unpaid intern. Frostkiller even implemented a massive improvement to my floor 3 skip. While I was going all the way around floor 1 and 2, Frostkiller was using this curve on floor 1 to skip up to this floor 2 platform, which immediately changed into a floor 3 skip without going around the circle again. And then, right afterwards, he did this. Instead of jumping into the junior financial analyst interview, he goes left off this ramp to this recovery platform, skipping the 3 wooden curves entirely. Then in cogs, he completely skips the wine mixer by cutting the corner on this ramp, skipping right to this next cog. He even hit this crazy barrel section where he went straight down the middle of it, jumping from these hexagon platforms before skipping right to the end of the section. In middle management, he had 2 small optimizations to save time. Instead of going around and inside the pyramid, he uses his momentum to scale up the side of it and bounce into this hallway, where you can turn around and get enough speed to hit the next ramp. Then, at the slanted building section, he rode this red curve and exited the curve high to bounce off this wall and get up to these wooden curves. He nailed department head skip first try, and then finished out the run with a pretty routine top 3 sections. But wow, so many day 1 skips that were found by the community and implemented in such an impressive run. Now, there were mistakes. This run wasn't clean by any means. It took him multiple tries to hit these vice president curves, losing him a ton of time. But for a day 1 run, there was an impressive amount of tech being implemented already. But unfortunately for Frostkiller, he would not be winning the money. The winner ended up being a player named Kerem, a German player who hit a 2046 on day 1. You see, Kerem was running the game relentlessly in silence. While Frostkiller believed he was in the lead, Kerem was studying the strats and applying cleaner movement. The Discord was very lively with the get-to-work runners posting new strats and skips and sharing new personal bests, so Kerem knew exactly what time he had to beat. And at 9 a.m. the next morning, 3 hours before the contest ended, he posted this screenshot with the 2046. He also kept his run unlisted on YouTube, so it's only able to be viewed now that the contest is over, and Kerem's run was actually unreal for a day 1 speedrun. Oddly enough, he used less skips than Frostkiller did, but his movement was cleaner and he had far fewer mistakes. Kerem was cutting corners off the main route throughout the run, and then in cog section, he cuts corners on the launchers before hitting a very tidy and optimized barrel section that skips a ton of the main route and is much safer. But in middle management, he applied a brand new skip discovered that we named Zorpsy Skip. Zorpsy discovered that by ignoring the actual route in middle management and jumping down to the second recovery launcher, you could actually use its speed to bounce off the wooden platform and ride up the wall, skipping a lot of the first lower lap of the area. It was a great find that saved a lot of time. Then, in the slanted building section of Middle Management, after using the same skip that Frostkiller used to get straight to the wooden curves, instead of going left to the start of the section, Kerem just used this runway to get enough speed to bounce straight onto this curve and continue the run. But here is where quite possibly the biggest time save happened that set Kerem apart from Frostkiller. Frostkiller, after this 3-ramp sequence, landed here and went into the department head hole, and then went across these glass bridges to jump up to this wooden platform. But Kerem found a way to skip all of that. By exiting high at the corner of this last curve with a ton of speed, Kerem found out that you could make it straight to the final ramp of the section and bounce straight into the detour section, where he then got enough speed to hit department head skip without the need for this ramp. This 3-ramp skip was genius. It skipped so much slow and tedious platforming, and it was an insane find for day 1. His final 3 sections were pretty standard. The Vice President jumps were first try, saving him a ton of time over Frostkiller, and he did use one innovation with these bounce pads, where he went full speed into this curve, which chained him into this ramp. But other than that, he clutched out the run with a 2046, winning him a clean 500 CAD prize for his efforts. All within the first 24 hours of the game's release. On day 2, the top runners who stayed up for those long hours to win the prize money took a much needed rest, as they would have all of day 3 to set new personal bests in leg 2. So me, returning from work, hopped on stream and began to study the world record strats. And with a max of 8 hours to play before I would once again need to go to bed, I started to do some runs. I was playing pretty well and implemented some extra strats that were found in the Discord, when suddenly, I got a raid from Smallant. Smallant? What the fuck? Who was apparently watching my speedruns on Twitch and YouTube to figure out the current strats.
We'll raid DanCorona so you guys can get strats from him, because he's pretty good. He's one of the runs that we watched that we were trying to beat yesterday.
He even teased me, pointing out that the reason I was already so fast was because I was a playtester and my name was in the credits.
Let's look at the credits really quick. Special thanks to our testers. DanCorona. Nepotism wins again.
Which, to be fair, might have some truth to it. But regardless, when I got into my runs for the day, I started to have some trouble with this one simple glitch. For some unknown reason, when I would grab onto the launchers in the game, sometimes I would phase through them and the launcher would move out from under my character, dropping me downwards and killing my runs. And at 3 AM on a world record pace run, this happened. I phased through the launcher and re-grabbed it on the bottom edge, but it was not enough because the lower grab position didn't give me enough height to reach the 4th launcher, and my run was killed. But in a moment of mental fortitude, with the clock moving deeper and deeper into the night, I pushed my luck and hit this run. The first split had received an update, with more corners being cut to speed up the section. After complaining a bit and talking myself down, I was able to fully reset my mentality.
Man, that's so annoying. Let it go, let it go. New run, new me, new run, new me.
After a slow and steady platform section, I made my way to the offer letter and implemented this new tech. The game, when it drops you down the chute, will auto-ragdoll you at a certain barrier as you fall, but by approaching from the right side and slowing down when you grab the offer letter, you can drift into the top right corner and ragdoll straight down, avoiding as many bonks as possible, saving you time. This trick is a little finicky though, as sometimes the ragdoll will just shoot you in a random direction, so being very gentle with your air strafing is key. Then, in the warehouse interview area, I hit a nice and tidy, tiny ramp section. By this point, I was starting to figure out the secret to get to work's momentum. I feel like everyone has had a little bit of trouble with these ramps, and I came to the realization as to why. So what I was doing at first with these jumps was feathering my air strafe in between ramps to line myself up for the smoothest ramp transfers, which does help. Clean ramp entries and exits are good, but sometimes even if you get the smoothest transfer ever, it still doesn't work. Well, you see, get to work's movement speed can best be understood as a sigmoid function, which is a graph that looks like this. On the left, we have your speed value, and on the bottom, you have your time spent holding a directional input. On a flat surface where your speed is only affected by raw inputs, the line on the speed graph resembles an S, an exponential curve with a rapid increase in speed that slows down before topping out at the game's speed limit. So let's say that this dot represents your character's momentum, and this horizontal line represents your character's current speed. If I hold forward in a direction, the dot moves up the curve with the line. The speed increases rapid at first, before slowing down the rate when approaching top speed. So when I'm saying I was feathering my air strafe, I was essentially making tiny inputs in the air to aim my character correctly at the next ramp. However, my speed here is only slightly moving up the graph, because when I'm letting go of the input, the dot itself will stagnate, as my slight inputs are only keeping the dot in place, as it tries to move back down the graph due to my lack of directional input that causes a loss in my character's momentum. Then, when I'm lined up with the ramp and landing, I would hold forward, which as you can see, doesn't get me up to my top speed and I fail the jump. The reason it fails is due to me not holding the input for long enough, which doesn't allow me to reach a high enough speed and make it to the ledge. So based on this understanding, I came up with a consistent strategy to nail these jumps every time. In the air, I started to let go of all directional input for a split second, and then hold forward in midair before I even hit the next ramp. That way, when I hold forward, it's full commitment and the directional input is able to be held for longer, allowing the dot on the line to climb higher and hit a high enough speed to make it to the jump. So instead of feathering, I discovered it's more of a 50-50 half on, half off input, where you let go of all control and then full send into the ramp, which was a bit tricky to do in practice while still nailing the ramp perfectly smoothly. If I needed to hold my input in midair, I found that my landing on the ramps would be less smooth, because I'm not feathering air strafing to land on the ramp nicely anymore. So in order to counteract this, all I needed to do was make one more tweak to my strat by finding the perfect distance of run-up I'd need before hitting the first ramp. So my forward distance and height would be the perfect amount to chain into the second ramp with my 50-50 input. And boom! Now the tiny ramps were a solved game. But continuing on with the run, I was now into warehouse section, where another optimization was introduced to me by none other than Smallant. After studying my runs for the current strats, Smallant actually returned the favor and showed me this hidden launcher in this pillar in the warehouse section that actually sends you up past the pay raise pizza party. Using this launcher speeds up the section so much, and after hitting the new warehouse manager skip, I was moving on to unpaid intern, where I perfectly nailed both skips here as well, and even did this updated version of analyst interview skip where you bonk straight off the block instead of using the recovery platforms. And then this happened. Load! What the fuck? And then my game fucking hitched, man! Honestly, serves me right for installing this game on my hard drive. And that might have tilted me a little bit because cogs ended up being extremely sloppy. But after recovering with a clean barrel section, we come to middle management, where a new groundbreaking discovery was made that would go on to change the state of the speedrun forever. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we call the top grab. Alongside the speedrunners who were relentlessly trying to lower their PBs to win some prize money, there was a separate part of the community who I started to call the scientists. These players had taken it upon themselves to hunt down skips and reveal every last potential time save possible and share it with the Discord. And in the first couple of days, no man was more ambitious than Big Willie. Willie had been feeding me strats for the whole first week, and he and Zorpsy found out about top grabs when labbing out Zorpsy's skip. In their findings, they changed Zorpsy's skip to a top grab strat, which more consistently got you up to the ledge. So how exactly does a top grab function? This is a mechanic involving the launchers that change the trajectory of your launch path, allowing for some crazy skips to be uncovered. By hitting the launcher and skating up to the top of it before grabbing on, you could actually grab a different plane of geometry on the top of the railing, which still triggers the launcher to react, but instead of pulling you along and shooting you out of a straight path, it actually pushes you upwards in the air, giving you more height and an entirely different exit angle. This first implementation was something I called Willie Skip, and it was a more consistent way to get up to this next ledge, as Zorpsy Skip had the tendency to fail. And besides, at worst what happens is I miss the top grab and then use Zorpsy Skip as a backup. And with the help of the scientists, I nailed the skip, saving me even more time. The slanted building part of middle management went as smooth as possible, with my 3 ramp skip into department head skip being nailed first try, and then it was time for the hard part. Starting off on the bottom floor, Smallant had taught me another new innovation where after hitting these bounce pads, I could bounce onto this gray edge and skip the first curves of this section. Then, yet another skip was found called Crack Climb. After getting enough speed on this ramp, you could ride up the wall and wedge yourself in this crack and monorail yourself to the end of the section without doing another loop around. VP White Room went pretty clean. Only some minor mistakes slowed me down, but no falls. And then, the final VP room started off with this insane corner cut. After getting the bounce pad speed into this curve, instead of flying straight off the ramp, I held up and to the right to jump straight up to this platform before the laser section. And after that, with ice in my veins, we clutched up.
Yes. Oh, it's not sub 20, but it's fucking there, man. It's world record still. It's not sub 20, but it's world record still, boys. Let's fucking go.
It wasn't the world's first sub 20, but with a time of 2023, I had successfully implemented all the new strats and claimed a world record time. And so, I could finally go to sleep on top of the leaderboard. However, we all knew that this was set to be short-lived. In the morning, my own friend Caden, aka the Bronze Blaze, had swiped the world record out from under me with the world's first sub 20, a 1908. It really be your own. Going into day 3, some confusion started to settle in within the community. Leg 2 of the contest was organized around day 2 and 3 of the game's release, but Isto and his team decided that the second leg would allow glitches. Not the insane ragdoll launch to the top, but minor glitches would now be allowed. Now, you might be confused. What other glitches are there? Well, for one, we had no idea if top grabs were going to be considered glitches. But there was a different mechanic that was considered a glitch that the people were contentious about. And I think I'll let Smallant show you this one. Climbing was a mechanic that essentially defeats the purpose of the game. People were essentially spamming grab and climbing up the side of walls like Spider-Man to reach the top of the map. Smallant himself used climbing to beat his first ever playthrough of the game. But the most confusing part was when asking Isto about it, he revealed that it was actually intended. Isto explained that he wanted more potential for worse players to save a fall on ledges they slipped off of, making them feel rewarded and create hype moments where the streamer dramatically saves themselves. Makes sense when trying to appeal to a wide player base. What they didn't intend to happen was Smallant climbing up the entire side of the last building. But because this leg allowed glitches, climbing became the new meta. And for me, I didn't understand it at all. I would spam grab over and over and make no progress up the wall. It was a nightmare, and it was hopeless. So I went back to running glitchless and honed my skills for the last leg, which was announced to return to the glitchless category. But for someone like Kerem, he cracked the code on how climbing works. Without categories yet set in stone, he had cleared Cadence 1908 and lowered it to a 1624 with glitches. On the other side of things, Frostkiller had set an 1829 claiming glitchless world record. So there was now a split forming into two different categories. While I was whittling my times down into the sub 18 range, Kerem was taking the run further and further, eventually landing a sub 15 minute run. The rest of us running glitchless due to our inability to climb assumed that he was just using climbing and discredited his times while fighting for the glitchless world record. But when you look at the winning run for leg 2, you start to realize that Kerem was simply the better player. So let's look at leg 2's winning run. Kerem's glitches allowed 1450. The beginning of the run is pretty much the same, but now we're about to see the extent of how top grabs were taking over the speedrun. Warehouse section now had 3 top grabs involved in cutting down the time immensely. The first one only skips a short loop of the early section. The second one launches you straight up to the Smallant launcher. And the third one massively skips you from the pizza party all the way up past warehouse manager skip, where a tiny bit of climbing is involved to get you over this wall. These top grabs skip a ton of ramps in the section and show just how lucrative the top grabs were. After a clean unpaid intern, we're into cogs, where Kerem uses this optimization that I actually learned really late on. You don't even have to grab the first cog, you could just bounce off of it and make it up to the ledge. But then Kerem introduces a massive optimization to wine mixer skip. The tech has been changed dramatically, now skipping the entire second half of the cog section. After hitting the second cog that launches you with speed down this ramp towards wine mixer, if you just hold forward, you can ramp up this wall high enough to peel off of it at the top and make it to this ledge that leads you straight into barrel section. Another crazy time save. Barrel section ended up being clean, and when going into middle management, Kerem implemented one of the most finicky skips in the game. A new skip I so lovingly call Zorpsy skip. Instead of heading to the second recovery launcher in middle management, Kerem jumps off the path early and heads for the first recovery launcher. By using a top grab on this one, you are launched upwards towards the underside of this platform. However, by top grabbing the far right or far left of the launcher, you can actually hold a left or right input for a second to dodge the platform and then hold forward to reach this barrels ramp, where now you can skip the entire beginning of middle management and head straight into the pyramid. Yet another massive time save. Then, after hitting this launcher, Kerem went around these hallways to skip the beginning of the slant building by bouncing off this recovery ledge, which pathed him nicely back into the route towards 3 ramp skip. Again, so many insanely lucrative time saves implemented so rapidly. What you have to understand is, isolated, these skips themselves aren't really that hard to pull off and figure out, but hitting them all back to back to back consistently and rapidly is insane, especially with how finicky the top grabs can get. And need I remind you, we're 75% into the run, and so far we're still glitchless. However, after one more new top grab innovation to skip this hallway's long sequence, Kerem pauses the game on the ledge of this building, and when he unpauses, he begins to climb. As it turns out, the rate you need to mash when climbing is a specific rhythm. A community member by the name of Jack had downloaded a metronome app and started to tinker with mash and grab at different beats per minute. The winning number was 215 BPM. So Kerem in this run paused his game to set up a metronome for 215 BPM and began to mash to the rhythm, allowing him to swiftly climb up the side of the building. But if there's anything we learned from watching Smallant climb the side of the skyscraper, it's extremely slow and hurts your hands. So instead of going all the way up, Kerem gets into the White Room of Vice President and goes back to the normal route. Here he implements more time saves, hitting 2 more brand new top grabs that cut the time of this section in half. The first cuts to this wooden beam here, skipping the first lap of the section, and the second skips you to the last mahogany ramp where you can just barely get enough speed to grab the ledge and climb up. And after a smooth last section with no changes, Kerem won leg 2 with a 1450 world record. That honestly barely used the climbing and was almost completely a glitchless run that was better than everyone else. And he had just earned himself another 700 Canadian dollars. If you're liking this video, hit subscribe and maybe even hit that like button. It'll help me out a lot. Back on the glitchless side of things, going into day 4, a user by the name of Finn the Leech had coded a practice mod for speedrunners to set save states and practice tech more quickly. This led to the scientists finding more tech and people like Smallant using it to get much better more quickly. Over the past 48 hours, I was trading personal best times with Smallant, and also trading strats with him. But then, while I was at my job, Smallant technically set the world record for glitchless with a 1643, smashing past my 19-minute PB. But after I got home from work, I fired up stream and was able to take the world record back with a 1629. So let's take a look at both of these runs and compare the two, witnessing the day 4 glitchless world record strats. In the first section, Smallant doesn't cut the first 2 corners, cuts the third, but not the fourth, before finishing out the section normally. But I was cutting every corner, and even did this last strat on the last ramp before bonking on the sledge to chain my speed into the first swinging platform. After both of us had a standard swinging platform section, when grabbing the offer letter, I was already ahead by 21 seconds. We both had bad ragdoll RNG before heading into warehouse section. Both of us opened with this new strat that skips the first top grab, but on the second top grab, Smallant hits it cleanly, while I'm forced to go around the longer way. We both hit the third top grab, but while Smallant knows how to climb and I don't, I struggled to get up the ledge and had to slide down and flip back up to gain momentum. Going into this hallway, Smallant now has taken back the lead and is 15 seconds ahead. Both of us had a bit of trouble in unpaid intern. I messed up the tiny ramps in the beginning a little bit, and Smallant slipped off the blue platform in floor 3 skip and had to climb back up. Then he accidentally slipped off after hitting the next skip and fell down into junior analyst interview before making a swift recovery. I hit the second skip cleanly, but ended up slipping off this long curve, having to restart it. So going into cogs, we were almost dead even, with Smallant having only a 1 second lead. In cogs, I was having a lot of trouble with the wine mixer skip, but Smallant, being in my chat, gave me a tip to hold forward at full speed and leave the wall at this shadow line. This helped me for the moment, allowing me to hit the skip in this run. But wine mixer skip was incredibly inconsistent for me. I would either have too much speed and horizontal distance forward that would make me splat, or not enough speed where I don't get high enough up the wall. This was driving me crazy, as it would kill so many runs for me and everyone else seemed to never miss it. Luckily in this run, both Smallant and I hit the skip. Except for Smallant, he let go of the last cog late here and had to reset in the lead up to wine skip. So when grabbing this first launcher, I now had a 20-second lead. And then, I hit a crazy new skip. If you top grab the final launcher in this sequence, it sometimes gives you enough height to fly over the wall and make it to this ramp in the barrel section that leads you straight to the end of the section. And with Smallant going around and doing the old barrel strat, it gave me even more of a lead, 31 seconds entering middle management. However, the next skip up was the inconsistent Zorpsy skip, which for me, didn't go too well. It took me 4 tries to nail it, losing me a large sum of time. And credit to Smallant, he nailed it first try. We both did the new tech heading towards the slant building with minor mistakes. I even went for the top grab strat, which takes you over the top of this curve and chains you into the red line curve a little smoother. But on 3 ramp skip, Smallant anticipated not having enough speed and pulled out of the curve, having to go through department head hole. But I nailed the skip cleanly. This set me ahead by 40 seconds going into the final section. I did, however, second try the top grab here while Smallant first tried it, but I still had the time lead. Now in Kerem's run, this is where he would normally start climbing, skipping the bottom floor. But in glitchless, we had to head into the section. Thankfully, new tech was discovered to skip almost all of department head. It involves hitting the corner of this bounce pad at a specific angle that it sends you forward and up the slope with enough speed to get up to the final jump of the area. But the execution of the skip was hard to figure out. I actually was the one to develop the lineup for the skip. When doing this section on the intended path, holding forward along this curve makes you hit the bounce pad normally. So then I thought, what if there was a specific distance up the ramp that I could stop and line myself up at, where holding forward would hit the corner at the perfect angle. My lineup ended up being at this third corner of the curved gray platform. Smallant later updated it to use these screws on the wooden texture, which are a little easier to see when quickly stopping and going in the flow of the run. However, even though it was the right distance to hit the corner of the bouncer platform, it still didn't actually work. Holding forward actually gave you too much speed, making you ragdoll from the force of impact when hitting the corner. So what I came up with was a rhythmic feathering of my forward input that would take off enough speed to not ragdoll, but still give you tons of speed to hit the skip correctly. On controller, my method was to let go of forward and flick the stick up 4 times at this pace, and on the 4th one, hold forward again. This gave me the perfect amount of speed to ignore the ragdoll and still launch me at the correct angle and speed to hit the skip. And before I went live, I actually taught that lineup to Smallant in his chat. For his version of the skip, he actually had to change up the rhythm, as the difference between my controller's analog input and his keyboard's digital input made the 4 taps not work the same. But after finding his own working rhythm, we now had a consistent way to hit the skip. Smallant, having just learned the skip minutes before this run, did it on his 2nd try, but my run had nailed the skip 1st try. In VP White Room, I hit both top grabs cleanly and moved on to the next section. Smallant did the old strat, skipping the first top grab and had to 2nd try the 2nd top drag for the next cut. So I now had a 1-minute lead on Smallant entering the final room, but here's where I messed up. I went for Kerem's bounce pad strat that skips you to the platform before lasers, but I messed it up. In doing so, I accidentally fell down to this ledge where I used the recovery bouncer to get back up, and in my desperation, I was forced to try out this brand new strat that I had never tried before. By hitting this recovery bounce pad, you could actually skip straight to this curve and head for the platforms before laser section. I ended up nailing it, but I lost a lot of time. Smallant went straight for the recovery bounce pad strat first, and gained a ton of time back on my run. Hitting the first laser wall, I had lost 53 seconds and now only had a 7-second lead. Both me and Smallant now only had to hit one more brand new skip that we both implemented here. At this wooden curve, you can actually fly off the top of it to hit this 2nd recovery bounce pad, which launches you up to the black curved railings, skipping a good portion of the end. But with clean executions on both our parts, I finished my run 15 seconds faster than Smallant and claimed glitchless world record with a 16:29 minute time. Going into the 3rd leg of the speedrunning competition, the rules were going back to the glitchless speedrun. But again, confusion was hitting the community at what the official rules for the run were going to be, and I'll explain to you why. First of all, Kerem's climbing run was considered glitched because he climbed up the side of the skyscraper. The plan from the devs was to patch out the skyscraper climb by making the texture slippery. However, since climbing was intended as a mechanic by the devs, it was ruled to be okay for the glitchless category so long as the climbing mechanic occurred not on the skyscraper at the end, skipping those sections. Secondly, the community wanted a ruling about top grabs. We had no idea whether or not this mechanic was a glitch. The speedrunners loved this trick as it made the run more hype and didn't actually break the game in any way or skip too much of the speedrun. So that was a big worry because if top grabs got banned, the whole route needed to change. But it seemed like a large majority was in favor of keeping them in glitchless, which is what ended up being the case. And the last and most important point of contention was FPS limiters. Okay, so remember this glitch I was struggling with where my character was phasing through the launchers and killing my runs? Well, as it turns out, Willie informed me that it was happening because of a difference in my game's frames and my monitor's refresh rate. My monitor was set to 144 Hz, while my frames in game were either uncapped at around a max of 240 or VSync locking it at 60. So changing my refresh rate on my monitor to 60 and keeping VSync on fixed the issue entirely. But then, the community, now knowing that FPS affects the launchers, started to get curious. Using RivaTuner, a third-party application to limit FPS, people started to find out that the launchers at lower FPS counts started to fling your character way higher than at 60 FPS, meaning there were extreme amounts of skip potential to be found with lower FPS on every launcher in the game. And it almost went to complete shit when Isto figured out about Frostkiller. Frostkiller was a top runner early on, rivaling Kerem for the money. But Frostkiller's computer setup was recording and playing the game off a single gaming laptop, meaning his computer wasn't able to hold a consistent 60 frames when speedrunning. Isto, hearing about this, aimed to change the previous rule set of locking everyone at 60 FPS to allowing runs that ranged from 30 FPS to 60 FPS. He didn't want to have to invalidate such a spectacular top player's run just because of a hardware disadvantage. But the community, seeing this rule change, loaded into the game with RivaTuner locking the game to 30 FPS and started to tear apart the current route. Thankfully, Isto, seeing the new ridiculous launches people were finding, swiftly changed the FPS rules again, now limiting people from 45 FPS to 60 FPS. And the launches at 45 were far less abusive on the run. However, they were still better than the 60 FPS launches, giving you more height and allowing for some improvements on the known current top grabs. And one final rule change that almost exclusively fucked me over was that the over-the-wall barrels top grab was banned. as it technically was an out-of-bounds glitch that they planned on patching out. So with the rules all laid out, now it was time for the speedrunners to get back to work. The weekend was here, and so many runners lowered their times into the 15-minute range. Frostkiller, Brandwagon, Gudigo, Sidejoff, Bronze Blaze, and even me started to lower their times. This is the point where I started to become a little bit of a choker. A ton of sub 15-minute runs were choked, with 3 being on the final jump. You see, there was one skip still giving me a ton of trouble, whilst everyone seemed to never miss it, Wine Mixer skip. Even though everyone kept telling me to just hold forward, I still would either splat or not get enough speed. Countless world record paces thrown over and over again. This skip was driving me to insanity. How could I be the only one that's bad at it? But then, it all clicked. Let me set the scene. I was talking with Jack in the Discord, discussing a skip that involved climbing. I was trying to further understand the climbing mechanic and was asking him for help. With the help of both him and Smallant, I learned that if I spammed twice per sound cue, the climbing rhythm would work, and I now knew how to climb properly. But the only problem was, I couldn't get the camera to stop rotating on me while my right hand was focused on spamming grab. While expressing this dilemma, a community member by the name of Donley then told me about a setting called Autocam, which only affects controller players. This setting auto-resets your camera back to being directly behind your character, which was inhibiting my ability to climb. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now I knew that this setting existed. That night on stream, I was very obviously tilted when I kept losing runs to Wine Skip. But thankfully, a community member by the name of Katie Gray was trying her best to help me figure out the skip. So Katie had made me a side-by-side clip of a successful wine skip versus one of my unsuccessful ones. Watching the clip, I analyzed it intently, trying to realize what I was doing wrong. And then, I figured it out.
Because they're letting go.
Is that Autocam? Oh my god, is it Autocam?
Well, they're letting go after the shadow, to be fair.
No, but look at the difference. Look. Watch this one. The camera rotates angles. This one stays straight on. That's why I'm losing speed.
It's because you're not holding forward. You're holding up at an angle, technically, because of the camera.
The autocam is, yeah, basically.
Yeah.
The autocam's turning me. Oh my fucking god.
Yeah.
If that's actually it, I'm gonna fucking lose my mind. How do you turn it off? So yeah, now the code was cracked. Wine skip was never an issue again. But having played the game for 8 hours straight without nailing the sub 15, I had to call it a night. On Twitch, I was seeing an increased viewership thanks to Smallant, and I was trying to spice up the content while speedrunning. On Friday night, I had my roommate Seb on the mic hanging out with the chat while I choked multiple runs. I think at this point I was suffering from a severe lack of sleep from streaming until 4 AM every night and going to work at 9 AM the next day, which was driving me crazy. So crazy that I actually convinced myself that the reason I wasn't getting world record was because I didn't look enough like the character. So I went as bald as I could without my parents thinking I'm a freak when I go home for Christmas, and rocked the buzz cut and the suit, finally nailing my sub 15. But despite the community and I's best efforts, Kerem was still simply better. While our times dipped into the 14 and 13 minute ranges, Kerem was setting sub 13 minute times. And the top opponents were me, who was a choke artist, Frostkiller, who was struggling to crack the 13 minute barrier, and the Bronze Blaze, who was getting close, but couldn't play much because of his job. And with the work week starting back up on Monday, it seemed Kerem was about to win all 3 legs of the competition. But one man stepped up to push Kerem to his limits. Let me introduce to you the former Only Up world record holder, Lance. While Kerem sat with the world record at a 12:36 using 45 FPS strats, the rest of us decided to stick to 60 FPS, not dealing with the hassle of pausing and using Riva Tuner to shift the FPS back and forth. But Lance was no stranger to this kind of tech. In Only Up, FPS manipulation was used to do, well, this kind of shit. And Lance, being a goated gamer who got in to get to work a few days after release, set a 13:14 on Monday afternoon. Gaining ground on Kerem fast, he had until Thursday at noon to try to grind out runs to beat Kerem. But as it turns out, he didn't even need that much time. Just an hour later, Lance set the new world record at a 12:12. With the money now under threat, Kerem bounced back, setting another world record at 12:10, with sub 12 the next big barrier to break through. And on Thursday, with 6 hours left in the contest, both players had done it. Kerem was the first, setting an impressive 11:48 with 6 hours remaining. Lance was also able to break the barrier, but came up shorter with an 11:55. After a lengthy and frustrating session, Lance decided to bow out in second place and give up his chance at the money. But he sure as hell made Kerem start to get a little nervous as the week came to a close. Especially when we found out that Lance was hiding some secret tech that Not Edge discovered and showed him in secrecy to skip almost the entire last section of the map. But unfortunately for him, Frustrated after playing the game all night, going for the victory, he decided to call it a night and go to sleep, willingly giving up on the money. This was the skip they found. For some reason, in the last section, by landing on the side of this recovery bounce pad block and spamming grab as you hit the pad, it actually gives you a bigger bounce than if you were to normally fall on the bounce pad. This increased height makes it straight to the second recovery bounce pad block, where you can now chain both bounce pads and skip almost all of the entire final room and go straight to these black curved rails. Lance, unable to utilize this in his runs, with 2 hours remaining in the competition, revealed the hidden strat to the Discord and logged off. Kerem, still running for extra security in his victory, saw the strat and couldn't believe his eyes. He knew very well that his current PB was not safe if he didn't implement this new tech. And so, he ended up learning the strat and uploaded this 11:28-minute world record with just 30 minutes to spare before the deadline. So let's take a look at Kerem's new world record, the run that solidified him as the winner of the Get to Work Triple Crown. In the first split of the run, a new strat had been discovered that skips the entire first lap of the level design. Discovered by Adnibal, by hitting the big ramp and going right to this beam, you can actually climb up the side of this ramp and continue on to the rest of the section. Then, at the entrance to the swinging ramps, after entering the section with speed, if you just go towards this brick wall, you can actually ramp up the wall, getting enough height to jump straight into the first entrance past these ramps. Kerem hit a clean ragdoll drop before heading into Warehouse. He pauses here, switching to 45 FPS to hit a top grab on the first launcher, which takes him straight to the second launcher. He hits that one normally and does the ramp cut before pausing and switching back to 60 FPS. He then goes off the ramp straight at the wall, which gives him just enough speed to get to the black pillar and climb his way up to the Smallant launcher. After hitting the Smallant launcher, he pauses again, switching back to 45 FPS to hit the next top grab, which gives him enough height to not even require a climb up the wall. After finishing up the section normally, he hits the unpaid intern tiny ramps clean with a lot of corner cuts before hitting the rest of the skip smoothly and unpaid intern. Cogs was also flawless, with the wine mixer skip being used to its full effect. Barrel section went smoothly and his middle management was also squeaky clean. 45 FPS strats make Zorpsy skip now way more consistent. And his slanted building was also flawless, with a perfect 3 ramp skip and department head skip. Kerem then made a minor tweak with his hallway top grab. Staying at 60 FPS to get less height, instead of launching and holding right, he actually holds left to go to this opposite corner and then jumps the gap before going straight to the second booster, cutting the curve and going straight to the lineup spot. After a minor hiccup, he's into VP White Room, where he switches to 45 FPS to hit both top grabs with ease, and then switches back before heading into the last room. Here, he successfully implements Lance's double bounce pad tech. Just an insane time save that luckily wasn't used against Kerem, and he was able to use it himself to secure the money. With ice in his veins and his family lineage containing the clutch gene, Kerem hits the final jump first try and cements himself into the history books as the Get to Work speedrunning competition Triple Crown winner, claiming the 500 CAD prize, the 700 CAD prize, and finally the leg 3 jackpot of 1,000 Canadian dollars. 2,200 CAD straight into Kerem's pockets, just for being good at this incredibly silly fighting game. Insane. With the contest now over, my own personal best time was still nowhere near where I wanted it to be. My new goal was to go out swinging with a sub-13 60 FPS time. I had no interest in using the 45 FPS strats, but now having figured out consistent ways to do all the tech, I was playing faster than ever, and through studying Kerem's winning run, I was putting up paces in the lower 12 range. It was only a matter of time before I clutched out a run. I hit the new climbing strat in the beginning, hit the window jump, and even got this weird ragdoll glitch where I regained control over my character mid-fall. I hit the new warehouse tech, perfected my climbing on this top grab, and was already on great pace like many runs before it. My unpaid intern was clean, hitting both skips smoothly, and I was just over 5 minutes heading into cogs. But wine mixer skip was next. Thankfully, getting rid of Autocam made this skip consistent for me, and we were moving on to barrels. I used this new, slightly faster barrel strat, and was able to implement it pretty smoothly into my runs. And then I was into middle management. It was time for Zorpsy skip. A run killer for sure, because at 60 FPS, it was still inconsistent on whether or not you get enough distance to make it to the platform. I missed it once, but on the second try, we just barely got there. And on the slanted middle management part, there was a new update to the route. I had just learned it and labbed it out that very same day. One of the newer scientists by the name of Adnibal had been feeding me any new tech the community was discovering after the competition's end, and he showed me this new routing that I developed my own lineup for. By top grabbing the launcher here, you can actually climb up this wooden ramp and get on top of this blue platform. Then by hitting this curve and exiting high, clipping the right wall, you can actually get above with enough speed to make it here. Then by jumping below the department head hole, you can use this runway to hit this skip. It seems like everyone has a different lineup for this one, but let me explain what I do. I go down the runway until I hit this line in the shadow. Then I turn around and go full speed, keeping the camera perpendicular with the wall in front of me, before exiting at the corner of the runway, strafing slightly to the right to turn without losing too much speed, hitting just above the line between these two windows where I bounce and clip this corner, which perfectly pops me up into the department head skip. Luckily, I nailed both first try and moved onto the hallway top grab. This is where I had my biggest time loss. My strategy for the top grab was to grab the left side of the launcher, but in this run, I was going way too far left, onto the corner of the geometry, which was giving me this weird launch right into the underside of the platform. After messing this up like 4 times, on my 5th try, the weird launch angle actually launched me further to the right enough where I dodged the bridge and got a quick landing into the next section. Thankfully, I was able to recompose and hit the next department head skip before also hitting both VP White Room top grabs, where I introduced this new corner cut that makes getting up to the top of White Room much less scary. And after hitting the double bouncer skip flawlessly, I hit the final jump first try and secured the sub 13 with a 12:57.
An absolutely generational run. Let's fucking go.
After the contest was over and done with, the community didn't just call it quits there. More and more talented runners and scientists kept running the game, discovering more tech. Players like Lord Mouse, Adniball, Not Edge, and Brandwagon all discovered skips and continued to lower their times. Even Frostkiller went on to develop the Route for All 100% category that included all the podcast collections, both hat collections, and the secret ending finish. On Twitch, countless streamers have been grinding like Squeaks, Smallant, Distortion 2, Papa Platt, and finally, after suffering through League Week, Ludwig took a crack at it. There's even been patches that have improved or added some things to the speedrun, as Isto Incorporated continues to polish and work hard on their game. They also went above and beyond and made Atrioc a custom version of the game with a harder final section and custom voice lines from his friends and community members. However, at the end of all this chaos that was the launch week of Get to Work, the early speedrunning era will go down in history being defined by the dominance of one singular player, and that player is still pushing the world record lower and lower as the game progresses. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the current world record run by Kerem, which happens to be the world's first sub 10-minute Get to Work speedrun. Starting out the run, immediately in the first section, a brand new skip was found that was actually introduced in the latest update. These vents on these arches' boost values have been increased, allowing Kerem to bounce straight into the swing platform section, making the first split able to be completed in roughly 30 seconds. Kerem then hits the brick wall ramp, skipping the first set of swinging platforms before cleanly moving on to the ragdoll, where he actually gets a bad ragdoll launch and pauses the game. I'm assuming he considered resetting, but luckily for him, he continued out the run. His lower warehouse remained unchanged, as he switches to 45 FPS strats to hit both top grabs with ease. But on the second top grab, he's changed up his strat. 45 FPS strats gave Kerem enough height and speed to where he can aim left in the next section, and go straight up the curvature of the final ramp, chaining his speed into the next segment. He then progressed normally before stopping himself at the top of this curve. Turning around, he went backwards down the curve and hit this insane skip to this recovery platform that gives him enough height to ramp up to the end of the section. Just a ridiculous jump for such a small time save. Unpaid intern remains exactly the same until junior analyst interview skip, which has received an update. By exiting on the last curve high, you can use that height and speed to get a lot of height on the final jump and aim for this pillar, where you can bounce backwards off of it, grabbing the golden platform and flipping up to head towards cogs. Wine mixer skip is executed perfectly, and now Kerem was heading towards barrels with virtually no mistakes. And then it just gets even more crazy. Lord Mouse had discovered this fast barrel strat that goes under the entire section, skipping across these recovery platforms before bouncing you straight up to the exit. Simply the most monkey ball type shit I have ever seen, and yet another insane time save. Zorpsy skip was hit first try, and then he heads into the slanted building section. This is where I believe Kerem makes his first and only real mistake. What is supposed to happen here is after getting the top grab, you can ramp up the wood and go all the way up this wall. But Kerem, not getting the proper speed, even with the 45 FPS strat, is forced to fall back down and try and use this wooden curve to get up there. But having to approach the curve from below instead of up high made the climb up the slant much slower, resulting in a minor time loss of 13 seconds. But back on the right path, he could now go down the department head runway and hit his own lineup before hitting department head skip. For the hallway top grab, Kerem goes for a different approach. Starting from the left side of the launcher, by top grabbing the very corner of the launcher at 45 FPS, Kerem gets this crazy angle and speed that allows him to chain his launch directly into the second bouncer and head towards the lineup. He hits it first try and moves on to VP White Room. The first top grab now has a new 45 FPS strat. With the increased height from the launch, Kerem aims himself straight for the second top grab and bounces off these gray beams to clear the gap. The second top grab remains unchanged, and he now heads into the final room. Immediately he goes straight for the double bounce pad skip, not even using a lineup anymore. He sends it off the left side, landing on the slant and spamming grab to give him the increased height launch. Then he chains his momentum onto the slant of the second bounce pad, giving him another increased height bounce and goes straight to the rail on the right side. After moving on through the curves, he then hits another crazy cut in the final curve section that was originally discovered by Adney, and after getting enough speed to clear the gap, he hits the end jump first try, securing an insanely impressive sub-10 world record that combines all the great tech from all the brilliant minds and players of this game's early speedrunning community. And that is how the game's early speedrun progression occurred so insanely fast. Huge thank you to everyone in the community for coming together and grinding out this brand new game. Thanks to all the players, scientists, and get-to-work viewers out there. A big thank you to Isto and his incredible team for making such a sick game. Big thanks to Big A and Smallant for hanging around in my chat and being so supportive. And thank you to you for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe for more video essays, check out my live channel at DanCorona Live, check out the Bozo Show with me and my roommate Nathan, and lastly, check out my Twitch stream where I'll be doing more things in 2025. Thanks for watching.